The richest man in the room is usually the one you didn't notice. Not because he is hiding, because he made a decision at some point in the accumulation of serious wealth that the most expensive thing he could do was look expensive, and he stopped doing it. Not out of humility, not out of some philosophical commitment to simplicity, out of a precise, calculated, almost ruthless understanding of what visibility actually costs and what invisibility actually produces. This is not a story about frugality. Frugality is what people practice when they have less than they want to spend. What genuinely wealthy people practice is something different in kind. It is the strategic, deliberate, psychologically sophisticated choice to decouple their identity from their appearance, and in doing so, to unlock a set of advantages that the visibly wealthy are systematically blocked from accessing. By the end of this investigation, you will never look at a person in plain clothes the same way again. And more importantly, you will understand something about money and identity that most people spend their entire financial lives completely unaware of. He walks into the dealership in jeans and a plain shirt. No watch, no visible signal of anything. The salesperson who greets him makes an immediate assessment, unhurried, automatic, entirely unconscious, and adjusts accordingly. The price anchors differently. The negotiation begins from a different position. The margin, the dealership was prepared to defend shifts before a single word about price has been exchanged. He has done this deliberately. He has been doing it for years. And across thousands of transactions, across every negotiation in his financial life. The cumulative effect of that invisible signal, or rather the absence of any signal, has produced a financial advantage that no investment strategy ever replicated at the same scale. Think about the most expensive purchase you have ever made. Think about whether you were dressed in a way that communicated your financial capacity before the negotiation began. Go to the comments and write guilty if you have ever walked into a negotiation wearing something that cost you money before the conversation started. Because what you experienced is one of the most consistent and least discussed tax structures in personal finance. Here is the mechanism. And this is the part that most conversations about wealth and appearance never reach. Every visible signal of wealth functions as a price anchor in every transaction it touches. The watch, the car, the neighborhood, the clothes, each of these communicates to every counterparty in every economic interaction a specific piece of information. That information is not just about status. It is about margin, about how much room exists between what you will pay and what you could pay, about how motivated you are, or are not, by the difference between those two numbers. The counterparty does not consciously think this. The adjustment happens at the level of intuition, of pattern recognition, of the automatic social calculus that every experienced salesperson, negotiator, and service provider has developed through thousands of interactions. They know, without knowing how they know, that the person in front of them has a different relationship to the price, a different pain threshold for the gap between the ask and the reality, and they price accordingly. The genuinely wealthy person who has removed the signal has also removed the anchor. They are negotiating from a position of apparent indifference that is, paradoxically, only available to someone who genuinely does not need to impress anyone in the room. The irony is structural. The person wealthy enough to afford the signal is also the person whose financial interests are most damaged by displaying it. The second dimension of this is more psychological and more personal, and it requires a degree of honest self-examination that most financial content never asks for. There is a specific and well-documented relationship between visible wealth consumption and what behavioral economists call ego depletion in financial decision-making. The maintenance of a visible wealth identity is not free in cognitive terms. It requires ongoing monitoring. The constant background assessment of whether the current signal is adequate, whether the visible markers are current, whether the appearance matches the internal story of who you are and what you have achieved. This monitoring is not experienced as effort. It is experienced as simply being aware of yourself in social space, but it consumes cognitive resources that are then unavailable for the analytical, patient, long horizon, thinking that wealth accumulation and preservation actually require. The person who has genuinely stopped caring what their appearance communicates about their financial status has recovered those cognitive resources entirely. They are not managing a performance. They are simply present. And the quality of financial thinking available to a person who is simply present without the background noise of identity maintenance is measurably different from the quality available to someone whose attention is partially occupied by the ongoing management of their visible story. This sounds abstract. It is not. It shows up in the specific ways that status-maintaining behavior distorts financial decisions. The upgrade that gets made, not because it adds genuine value, but because it maintains the narrative. The investment that gets passed on because pursuing it would require admitting uncertainty in front of people whose perception matters. The negotiation that gets conceded not because the terms were bad, but because pushing further would feel, in the social context of the transaction, like someone who needed to push. These are not trivial costs. They are the ordinary financial texture of a life organized around a visible identity. And they compound across decades into something that would be deeply uncomfortable to calculate honestly. Comment identity tax if that concept just described something real in your own financial behavior. Because naming it is the first step towards stopping paying it. And most people pay it for their entire lives without ever knowing it has a name. The third layer of this investigation goes somewhere that finance almost never goes. Into the specific relationship between visible wealth and the quality of the relationships it produces, and why that relationship quality is itself a financial variable of enormous consequence. When wealth is visible, every relationship it touches is altered by the visibility, not maliciously, not even consciously, in most cases, simply by the presence of the number as a factor in the social dynamic. People relate to what you represent as much as to who you are. The requests that arrive, the social obligations that form, the particular quality of attention that you receive from people who are, consciously or not, relating to the resource as much as to the person. This matters financially in a way that is rarely articulated. The quality of information available to a person is significantly determined by the quality of the relationships through which that information travels. Genuine, uncontaminated relationships formed without the distortion of visible wealth as a factor produce more honest feedback, more accurate assessments, more reliable warnings, and more useful intelligence than the managed relationships that form around visible success. The person in plain clothes receives a different quality of truth from the world than the person whose visible signal has already shaped everyone's response before the conversation begins. He has said this directly when asked, that the most valuable financial information he has received in the last decade has come from people who had no idea what he was worth, who talked to him as a person rather than as a position, who offered opinions unfiltered by the instinct to tell a wealthy person what a wealthy person wants to hear. That unfiltered truth is itself a financial asset, rare, irreplaceable, and systematically destroyed by the visibility of the wealth it surrounds. Here is the fourth dimension, and this is the one that reframes everything that came before it. The genuinely wealthy person in plain clothes is not practicing restraint. They have made a discovery about the nature of wealth that most people spend their entire financial lives one level away from reaching. The discovery is this: wealth is not a thing to be expressed. It is a condition to be protected. And the most effective protection is invisibility, not the invisibility of hiding. The invisibility of a person whose identity does not depend on external confirmation, whose self-concept is anchored in something that cannot be assessed from the outside, cannot be threatened by market fluctuations, cannot be leveraged by anyone who wants to use the appearance as a pressure point. The person whose identity is internal is, in a precise and measurable sense, financially freer than the person whose identity is external, regardless of which of them has the larger account. This is why the phenomenon is not about the money at all. It is about the psychology that precedes the money, protects the money, and determines what the money ultimately produces. The wealthy person in plain clothes has not arrived at simplicity. They have arrived at something more sophisticated than anything the visible consumption of wealth has ever produced. They have arrived at the freedom that wealth is actually supposed to provide and recognize that the performance of wealth is the most efficient mechanism ever developed for destroying it. The people who build wealth and keep it across generations share one visible characteristic, that is, paradoxically, the characteristic of having no visible characteristics. No signal, no performance, no announcement. Just the quiet, unassailable confidence of a person who has nothing to prove to any room they walk into because the proof they needed stopped being external a long time ago. That confidence cannot be purchased. It cannot be signaled. It cannot be worn or driven or displayed in any denomination. It is the product of a specific internal architecture that takes years to build and that most financial content will never discuss because it does not involve buying anything. It is also, in the end, the only form of wealth that compound interest cannot touch, because it lives in a place that markets cannot reach and that no transaction can either create or destroy. So here is the question that closes this investigation. If you stripped away every visible signal of your financial status tomorrow, every marker, every indicator, every object that communicates something about what you have, what would remain of your identity? And is what remains the foundation you are actually building on? Go to the comments and write your honest answer. Not the version you would share publicly, the real one. Because the gap between those two answers is exactly where the most important financial work of your life is waiting.